I woke up to the sound of my alarm blaring in my ear. I reached out blindly, fumbling for the snooze button, but my hand met the cold surface of the bedside table instead. It took a few moments before I finally silenced it. The bedroom was dark, save for the thin strip of light creeping through the curtains. My body ached as I stretched, every muscle protesting the movement. I had barely slept. Again. The clock on the nightstand blinked 5:30 a.m. The kids were still asleep, thank God. I couldn't afford to wake them up too early. Max had been staying up late lately, fiddling with his phone after I'd told him not to. And Lily, she never seemed to tire. She could run and play all day without a single moment of stillness. I often wondered how I used to have energy like that. But right now, my body felt like it was running on fumes. I pulled myself out of bed, dragging my feet across the floor, and padded into the kitchen. The house was eerily quiet. The familiar morning routine loomed ahead, and I already felt the weight of it on my shoulders. I opened the fridge, staring at the empty shelves. I hadn't had the chance to grocery shop in days. The thought of making breakfast seemed like a monumental task, but I had no choice. I had to keep up appearances for the kids. They couldn't know how exhausted I really was. Max, Lily, time to wake up, I called out, already feeling the ache in my throat from speaking louder than I wanted to. I rubbed my eyes as I scrambled to get the cereal and milk out, barely noticing the small puddle of spilled milk on the counter. I wiped it up quickly before it spread too far. Max came down the stairs first, his messy hair falling in his eyes. At 10 years old, he was starting to resemble his dad more and more each day. I tried not to think about that. He was a good kid, but lately, he'd been quieter, more distant. I couldn't blame him. I wasn't exactly the picture of a perfect mother, not by a long shot. "Morning, Mum," he mumbled, slumping into the chair at the table. He didn't look up, his attention already back on the phone in his hand. The sight of it made my blood boil. I'd told him to stop using it in the mornings, but he ignored me. Still, I didn't have the energy to fight about it today. Lily, on the other hand, was bouncing into the kitchen, her big blue eyes wide with excitement. She had so much energy, always. I smiled at her, grateful for the brief moment of brightness she brought into the day. "Mum, look," she exclaimed, holding up a crayon drawing she'd worked on last night before bed. "It's us!" I took the picture, admiring her effort, even though it was nothing more than a bunch of stick figures with big, happy smiles. "It's beautiful, sweetheart," I said, trying to mean it. I kissed the top of her head as she twirled around in circles, but in the back of my mind, I was already thinking ahead. I had to get the kids dressed and ready, make sure they had everything for school, and figure out how I was going to get through another long day at work. I didn't have time for a moment's peace. The morning chaos continued as I rushed to get everyone ready. Max didn't want to eat breakfast, then complained when I reminded him to finish it. Lily spilled orange juice all over the table, and I had to clean it up before it stained the wood. And all the while, I kept checking the clock, hoping we weren't running too late. I'd been late before, but today I couldn't afford to be. Finally, I got them both in the car. I put on a smile, though inside I was already exhausted. Max was sulking in the back seat, staring out the window, while Lily chattered away, asking me a million questions about everything. I tried to answer her, but my mind was somewhere else, already mentally preparing for the day ahead. At work, I barely had time to breathe. I rushed in, a little later than usual, hoping no one would notice. My boss, Mr. Hargrove, wasn't exactly a fan of tardiness, but I'd learned to keep my head down and power through. There were too many things to do, too many people depending on me. I spent the next few hours answering calls, filing papers, and organizing appointments. Every time the phone rang, I felt my stomach tighten, knowing there would be something else added to the already overflowing list of tasks. But the worst part was that I couldn't focus. My mind kept drifting back to the kids. Max would be at soccer practice soon, and Lily had a dance class. I had promised them I'd be there to watch, but I could already tell that wasn't going to happen. Around noon, I got a text from Max. "Mum, are you coming to my game today?" My heart sank. I had promised. I had promised I'd be there to watch him play, to show him that I cared. But the pile of work on my desk grew larger, and Mr. Hargrove was already looking at me, waiting for me to finish up before the next meeting. I quickly typed a response, not wanting to disappoint him either. Sorry, Max, I have to work late today. I'll be at the next one, I promise. I hoped he'd understand, but as I hit send, I already knew that I was failing him. I was failing them both. The rest of the afternoon passed in a blur. I didn't even notice the clock ticking away. Every task felt like it took tens longer than it should have. By the time I finished work, it was already dark, and I was barely holding on. I couldn't even remember the last time I'd had a moment to myself. When I finally got home, Max was already in his room, headphones in, probably playing a game. Lily was sitting on the couch, watching TV, her eyes wide but vacant. I could see the way they were both growing up so fast, the little kids I once knew turning into young adults. It terrified me. Dinner was rushed, as always. I threw together something quick, chicken and pasta. Max barely touched it, and Lily kept asking for dessert before finishing her meal. I didn't have the energy to argue. I just needed them to eat and go to bed so I could get some rest. But even then, rest felt like a distant dream. As I sat down to help Max with his homework, the weight of everything seemed to crash down on me. There were bills piling up, a pile of laundry that never seemed to get smaller, and a house that always looked like a tornado had passed through it. I tried to keep up, but every day felt like I was barely holding it together. By the time the kids were in bed, I sank into the couch, my body aching, my mind racing. I pulled out my phone and checked social media. People posting about vacations, days out with their kids, time spent with their partners. I felt like I was falling further behind, like everyone else had it together while I was barely surviving. And then, finally, the silence of the house hit me. The kids were asleep, and it was just me. I should have been happy for the quiet, but instead, it felt like a reminder of everything I had lost: my own time, my own identity, everything that had once been about me. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the tears fall. I wasn't crying because I hated my life. I wasn't crying because I didn't love my kids. I loved them more than anything. But sometimes the weight of it all was too much. I was exhausted, mentally and physically, and I didn't know how much longer I could keep going at this pace. Tomorrow, I will wake up and do it all again. I will get them ready, drop them off, work, cook, clean, and repeat the cycle. But for tonight, I let myself feel the weight of it, just for a moment. I need this quiet. Tomorrow, I'll have to be strong again.